I'm Dr. Alexis Artwohl. I'm a retired clinical and police psychologist specializing in trauma. I'm still doing training with law enforcement and with citizens on some of the psychological and emotional issues involved with use of deadly force and the implications for your physical, legal, and emotional survival. And today we're going to be talking about a variety of issues that can impact your survival in those three areas. One of the most common emotional reactions that people have in the wake of any kind of a life-threatening event is second-guessing of self and others. In fact, research with the LA County Sheriff's Office showed that in the wake of being involved in a shooting, second-guessing of self and others was the most common emotional reaction in even professional police officers. It's dangerous to your emotional survival if it goes on beyond the point at which it might be helpful. It's very normal in the immediate aftermath of any kind of an event, it could be a car wreck, a shooting, whatever, for people to think about it a lot over and over and over again. You're playing it over and over in your mind, you're second guessing, maybe I should have done this, maybe I couldn't have done that, what else could I have done, how could I have prevented it, etc., etc. In the immediate aftermath, people usually find that helpful because your brain has experienced a shocking event and is now desperately trying to make sense out of it. Part of making sense out of it is dreaming about it, thinking about it a lot, and doing all that second guessing. Your brain is saying, okay, this is really dramatic, I need to make sense out of it, and I need to learn some takeaway lessons for my future survival in case something like this happens to me again. So for the first few days after the event, it's all good, it's often very productive. But sometimes people get stuck there and they can't move beyond it. You also need to realize that the second guessing that people do is almost always irrational, and people are obsessing over things that really they could not have predicted and controlled. And they're second guessing themselves, and they may be second guessing other people who may have been at the scene. This is important for your emotional survival so that you aren't beating yourself up. Like I said, it's normal to do that for a short period of time, but at some point you got to accept the reality, well, stuff happens, I did the best I could, I've learned what I can from this experience, it's time for me to move on. Most of us are able to do that. Sometimes we get stuck there, and if we do get stuck there, that can become very psychologically damaging, because then we start feeling lack of confidence, we start feeling guilty, and all kinds of other negative outcomes that really aren't going to help us down the road. The second guessing is important to understand also for your legal survival, because if you do decide to give an interview and you start second guessing yourself during the interview, that's not good, because you are now obsessing and speculating over things that have really no relevance to the objective facts of the case. Can you take some kind of an event like a car wreck or a self-defense shooting or many other issues and parse it down, do hair splitting and think, well, maybe there might have been things you could have done differently in hindsight? Well, sure, that always happens. No, life isn't perfect, events are rarely perfect, you're not perfect. The criminal justice system needs to be concerned about what would a reasonable person do in the same circumstance. And reasonable does not mean perfect. So the criminal justice system isn't necessarily going to expect that from you. You shouldn't expect it from yourself. But if second guessing is not understood for what it is, it can become potentially a problem in the criminal justice system. That's one of the reasons I encourage people to understand some of the memory and other issues involved, and also to understand the emotional impact of the second guessing, so when they are giving a statement, they're able to stick to the objective facts of the case that are relevant. And during a taped interview is not the time to be working out all of your emotional issues that could show up potentially in your trial. That's not the place for you to get psychotherapy. The place for you to get psychotherapy is with a trauma incident specialist. That's really not a bad idea. Something to do in the immediate aftermath of one of these events is for you and your family members, and I would encourage each person to have their own separate session, to have at least one session with a trauma specialist to get a debriefing where you will have a safe, confidential place where you can dump any grief, anger, fear, second guessing, all of these private emotional issues that are going to be impacting you. That gives you a safe, confidential space to work your way through those issues. Dumping all of those issues for the first time in an interview that will be taped for the criminal justice system, if you decide to do that, is really not your best option. Another great value of having an attorney is you can have those same conversations with your attorney, and those are also confidential. So just something to be aware of. The second guessing is normal. You need to take it with a grain of salt. You need to work your way through it. You need to understand that most of it's something that you couldn't have controlled. Hopefully the criminal justice system understands that as well. And it's just something that you need to process and get through it.